All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming and thanks for being with us during this Thanksgiving break. And I'm pretty sure Ya-Ting gonna make you feel worth it by listening to her presentation. So Ya-Ting is a PhD candidate in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at New York University. And Ya-Ting is also affiliated with the NYU Center for Cybersecurity. So Ya-Ting's research work focuses on the game theory optimization with applications to the security and resilience of AI-driven cyber-physical human systems. In addition to the recognition from our technical committee on security and privacy, Ya-Ting is also receives a award from RSEC conference and is entitled the Security Scholar. I think in this year or last year, right?
2024,
2024.
2025, yeah.
25. Oh, this year actually, pretty recent.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure Ya-Ting has the credentials for presenting, the latest trend on securing the AI-driven cyber physical systems from a cross-layer design. So without further ado, I present you Ya-Ting.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and maybe also good evening, everyone. Today, I'll share the main direction of my PhD research. And as Tao just mentioned, my goal is to use game theory and add on a little bit cognitive science to help design a more secure and more resilient cyber physical human system in the AI era. So, just briefly introduce myself. I'm currently a PhD candidate in EC at New York University, and my research focuses on trying to propose computationally trackable frameworks for assisting the design of resilient AI-driven cyber-physical human system, which is abbreviated as CPHS. And this research agenda sits at the intersection of these five area, which are AI applications, security and privacy, communication and networking, and also with game theory and cognitive science. So basically, this is today's outline. I'll begin with the challenges in today's cyber physical systems, and then use examples to show why security and resilience are important for such trustworthy CPHS. Then I'll briefly go through my works along the pathway of the trust framework for secure and resilient design, and then specifically shift the focus to one of my recent works that I think is the most interesting, which is exploiting adversaries' trust for proactive defense methods. And finally, we will conclude the talk. Yeah. So let's get started. Mm, According to NSF's definition, cyber-physical systems are engineered systems that are built from and depend on the seamless integration of computation, which is the cyber layer, with physical processes and components, enabling hybrid intelligent control over physical processes in order to drive innovation in the science and also the society. So some examples include smart homes, intelligent transportation, and also autonomous vehicles, and smart factories and smart manufacturing. So this is the part that I found being an electrical engineering student or researcher. It's very exciting because the cool technologies we used to see only in movies are actually being realized today. And we are ones who make contributions to such cool advancements. However, as these systems become smarter and more complex, new challenges may arise. So the first challenge is the human factor, because we humans may have our own preferences and we may not be rational in some situations and may not also make the right and rational decision all the time. For example, even though we know that a certain alternative route may be faster, from our home to school, but we may still choose the other route that we are more familiar with. So this is related to the preference part. And besides, humans may also have limited cognitive capabilities and different cognitive biases. So when we are stressed, getting tired, overloaded, or being distracted, we may not again be able to make the optimal decision and are prone to make mistakes like falling for phishing scams. And the second challenge is the integration of AI into such cyber-physical system. And even though I know that there's lots of effort working toward explainable AI, but some models are still remain black box to users. We see the outputs, but we don't understand how the decisions are made. That kind of opacity naturally leads to users' trust issues. And what's even worse is that some malicious entities can also use generative models to produce misinformation, scams, or even convincingly impersonate others, such as maybe phishing emails from that imitate a CEO's tone. So when we bring together AI and human interaction, the conventional CPS evolves into AI-driven cyber-physical human systems. And in this type of system, the cyber, physical, and human layers interact with each other, and the security and resilience properties of these layers may also influence each other and can even be amplified. So it also amplifies the system level risk. And just give some quick explanation. So security is that we want to prevent attacks from happening. But the resilience is the ability to maintain core functions and recover quickly after attacks or system failures. I think these two terms are somehow complementary because without security, there's no first line of defense. And without resilience, once the defenses fail, the system can collapse. So in the next part, we will continue with why security and resilience matter in CPHS. Let's see some example. So in September this year, a ransomware attack on company called Collins Aerospace. Its checking and onboarding system is being attacked, so this caused an operational outage at multiple European airports, forcing them go back to human manual processing and then resulting in widespread delays. This is an example of cyber attacks causing a cascading disruption across critical infrastructures along the trust chain. And another example is that earlier this year in July, attackers exploited a vulnerability in Microsoft SharePoint, trying to penetrate servers and exfiltrate internal communications and also sensitive documents. The victims to these attacks include government entities, tech companies, and also some research institutes. And this is again an example showing that when a major node has a vulnerability, the whole trust chain is at high risk, and it may even threaten national security. So with the growing complexity of AI-driven CPHs, trust is an important element because risk can propagate across components in physical, cyber, and human layer. So each component in each layer must be able to trust the others in order to cooperate effectively and also to reinforce system resilience. So again, my research is trying to understand the trust issues in the CPHS. So I leverage game theory and cognitive science to try to develop computationally tractable frameworks for understand such trust issues in order to help the design of resilient AI-driven CPHS. As we mentioned earlier, this research sits at the intersection of AI applications, communication and networking, security and privacy, and game theory because attack and defense naturally have conflicts of interest. And we also try to consider human cognition since we want to incorporate human decision-making patterns into the conventional CPS. So how do we actually understand trust? The first step along the line is trust assessment, in which we try to ask questions like, is a component trustworthy? And because people usually don't trust high-risk components, so we perform risk assessment for the trust assessment. And an example of my work is we try to use navigational recommendation system as an example, and we propose a risk assessment framework following the ISO standards and builds a metagame model between the users, the CPS, which is the navigational recommendation system, and also the threat model and the evaluator. So each attack scenario, for example, can be characterized by the attacker's objective, the attack strategy, and the attack method, which together form the threat profile shown in the red color. And the risk here, specifically in the navigational recommendation system, refers to the adverse impact on the system and its users, such as changes in traffic flow or travel time caused by the attack. The adverse impact can be either network-wide or locally on certain targeted routes. So the second step along the line is establish trust between users and the system. So standing from the user's point, how do we build users' trust on a system? So consider again a navigational recommendation platform that claim to use some privacy-preserving mechanisms, and a single user cannot easily verify such claim since privacy verification often requires many samples. So in this case, we propose a crowd auditing framework that utilizes public audits to create reputational threats that can pressure the platform developer not to deviate from their original privacy claims. And the main difference between this work and other auditing frameworks is that because the auditor we consider here are all humans with limited attention and different expertise and knowledge. So we model such limitations using the so-called rational inattention model. On the other way around, how to build platforms trust toward users. So in examples like IoT edge computing or AI agent services, users may have the incentive to overuse resource in order to increase their own utility. So in this case, we try to design pricing frameworks using mechanism design so that being honest and choosing resources that align with the user's true needs becomes the best strategy for the user. Thereby, we can reduce resource abuse. And the third part is after we establish or building trust between the users and the system, how do we maintain such trust? Social medias often make trust fragile because we can think of For example, if there's a rumor that a recommendation system steals personal user data, such rumor can quickly destroy users' trust on the system. So beyond just detection or clarification, we propose a more proactive measure using information design. In this context, the social network platforms labels false content and shapes users' opinion so that the community reactions impose, again, reputational threats on the malicious content providers, discouraging misinformation at the source, and try to encouraging content providers to spend more effort to verify the truth before posting the information. And the key finding in this work is that even though there may be inevitable detection errors, the platform's optimal policy is still transparent tagging, which can nudge the provider not to generate misinformation at the first place. And the next step is exploiting trust, which is the idea that I personally think very interesting. And we will focus on this for the rest of the presentation. So actually the core idea is that if attacker can exploit user trust to attack, such as examples in phishing scams, so can we flip the idea and exploit attackers' trust and cognitive vulnerabilities as a way to defend? Let's just step back and take a look at the brief history of cyber defenses. So the figure aims to summarize the evolution of cyber defense philosophies from the early days. From the early days of reactive security to the emerging era of AI-driven proactive defense. And before 2000, cybersecurity was more like reactive, and organizations rely on tools such as antivirus systems, firewalls, and early intrusion detection system. These solutions responded often after an attack had already occurred. And in the mid 2000 through the early 2010s, the field shifts toward prevention and mitigation. Intrusion prevention system gained traction in this period, and some major standards and frameworks, including ISO and the NIST cybersecurity frameworks or incident response frameworks, they introduce structured process for preparing, detecting, analyzing, and recover from cyber incidents. However, the battle between the attacker and the defender is often unfair. The attacker only needs to succeed once, but the defender needs to prepare for every possible attacks. So around 2015, defense strategies become increasingly proactive. The focus moved to anticipating attackers' behavior. So, for example, deception technologies matured and become popular during this period, and honeypots and honey nets also become widely adapted. Besides, red and blue teaming evolved into purple teaming, which coordinated offensive and defensive insights to strengthen resilience of the system. And looking ahead into 2020s and beyond, we enter the era of AI-driven proactive defense. And in this phase, AI system can support predictive, adaptive, and also autonomous defense operations. So some recent example include some agentic security, where AI agent can help in sensing, reasoning, planning, and executing the defensive actions. So speaking about proactive defenses, what we learned previously or what we observed previously about human factors make us rethink how to do defenses. So adversaries are humans too, so they should have cognitive vulnerabilities too. And whenever there are cognitive gaps or differences due to such cognitive vulnerabilities, there are opportunities for arbitrage. So we call this type of concept cognitive arbitrage, which is an analogous to financial arbitrage. But instead of price differences, we try to exploit the cognitive differences in order to induce attackers into mistakes, wasting their time and resources. So let's see an example. There are many cognitive vulnerabilities that the attackers can have, and we pick two that might be more familiar to most of the people here. So the first one is the sunk cost effect, with which the attacker will keep pursuing a path because they've already invested lots of time and resources. And the second one is the confirmation bias, in which the attacker may overweigh evidence that confirms their initial assumption and discount contrary evidence. For example, in this case, they may think that the resource must be valuable if it is this well protected. And these biases will make the attacker think that they just need to try harder or use a different method. And these biases eventually will cause the attacker to waste effort or step into traps such as honeypots. So to dive a little bit deeper, I'll let participate in a Gambit project. This project is intended to answer the following question. Is that can cognitive vulnerabilities be detected and measured during live cyber operations? And can cognitive informed defenses be embedded and adapted in real time? So the project ran a 2-day rating experiment with industrial and academic partners, and participants with hacking skills were told to exfiltrate valuable data from a simulated small business network, shown on the left-hand side. And participants were classified into an open group and an expert group based on their skills test. And this project aimed to collect multi-model data, including network pickup data, key log, terminal histories, participant reports, and also psychometric questionnaires. The experiment had control and trigger groups. The trigger groups deploy deceptive triggers at specific network locations, which are marked with purple stars in the left figure. And some examples of triggers, for example, for the sunk cost fallacy, there's a misleading password protected decoy files on the green arrow, the location with the green arrow. And it's intended to see whether attackers persist on a losing path or not. And the other example is the base rate neglect. Base rate neglect somehow can be seen as the opposite of the previously mentioned confirmation bias. where attackers only focus on the evidence that confirms their initial assumption. But under base rate neglect, attackers may ignore the base rate, which is the learned common probabilities, and overreact to new vivid observations. So to measure base rate neglect, the experiment observe whether attacker rely on new evidence or consider prior likelihoods more. For example, is the probability of finding real admin credentials still considered by the participants? And the raw data set is published on IEEE data port for those who are interested in this. So some simple experiment analysis done by the project is that the project tried to compare time spent on the correct attack path, which is shown on the y-axis, with and without triggers, which are on the x-axis. And the goal of this experiment is that an effective trigger should reduce time spent on the correct path, since it means that the attacker is being deceived and diverted. And results actually show that triggers significantly reduce time on the correct path. And the non-expert group, shown in blue color, were more affected than the experts group, shown in the red color. And there is a bigger gap between trigger and control experiments for the open group, because the blue ones reduces more compare between the control and the trigger experiment. So the previous motivative experiment confirms that deception that triggers cognitive biases can effectively degrade attacker performance. So there's indeed an opportunity for cognitive arbitrage. And to build from such a conceptual idea to modeling frameworks, we need to first model the attacker and defender interaction. So this is the first question we need to answer before deciding when and where to use which deceptive trigger. And because attack and defense form a natural conflicts, so game theory might be a useful tool. And because the attacker and the defender interacts in a dynamic network environment, so maybe dynamic game is a good option. And because attacker typically do not know whether the deceptive trigger is present or not, so here comes the incomplete information game. So formally, we model steps along an attack path, which is the red boxes in the network shown on the left-hand side as the state S. And a mode theta denotes the active deception the attacker is interacting with, which is unknown to the attacker. And then at each stage, the defender and the attacker choose actions. The actions can be efforts, detection, monitoring for the defender, and can be also efforts, exploitation, obfuscation, and privilege escalation for the attacker. And then a transition function, which depends on the game mode theta. It depends on the game mode theta because different deception may delay the attacker for different amounts of time. So such transition function will determine whether the attacker can advance to the next state or remains at the current one. And both players will receive immediate rewards, RD and RA. Then the attacker updates beliefs about the game mode theta. or the deception setup via Bayes rule, and the interaction continues until the attacker's lifetime in the network ends. So in this context, the equilibrium concept here is the one-sided epsilon perturbation Nash equilibrium, abbreviated as epsilon PB and E. And why we need equilibrium is because it provides a predictable outcome of strategic interactions that allows researchers to analyze and design a system. The attacker's strategy here is choosing action or distribution of actions that maximize the expected utility based on the state. And the defender strategy is, again, choosing actions to maximize their expected utility based on both the state and game mode. And a policy or a strategy profile is said to be one-sided epsilon PB and E if we satisfy the following two constraints. The first one is belief consistency, which means that the attacker's belief must updating according to Bayes rule. That is, the attacker cannot just randomly guess. And the second one is sequential rationality, which means that the strategy are epsilon optimal given all possible modes and initial states at every initial stage. In other words, it's just that no player can gain more than an epsilon improvement in utility by deviating to other strategies. And then we'll proceed to the design problem. So after modeling attacker-defender's interaction within the dynamic network environment, the next question we ask is, how should deception be designed? That is, when and where to use which deception, so that defenders can retain a strategic advantage. And the first challenge here is that single deceptions have limited lifetime. Once an attacker discovers a trap, the cognitive gap between the attacker and the defender closes, and that deception is less effective. So during the design part, we assume that the defender has a set of deception techniques, but each technique can only be used once. And the second challenge here is that deceptions also cost resources. So unlimited activated new deception or unlimited switching the deception mode is unrealistic. So we assume that within an attacker's lifetime, we have capital K stages, and the defender can perform at most capital M switches of the game mode or the activation of deceptive triggers. So here comes the overall deception design framework. The top strategy level is the defender's decision problem. It aims to solve the question about when and where to activate which deception. So the defender preserves the cognitive advantage. And this is a stopping time decision process because the defender decides when to spend one of the limited budgeted switches. And as previously mentioned, the middle operation level is modeled by a one-sided information Markov game, which try to solve the multi-stage planning problem for a certain chosen deception. And the lower tactical layer represents the detailed implementation of specific techniques, and procedures. So build on tactical and operational level, the defender's strategic objective is to maximize the utility by deciding the right time to switch. So here comes the stopping time decision process. In order to preserve the defender's cognitive advantage, the defender's utility at a strategic layer is defined uh, as on the slides. The defender can only gain reward only when the attacker does not know the true game mode. So the figure on the right also shows the same concept. Only when the attackers believe about the true mode, which is the orange line, is less than a threshold EDA, we would say that the defender has superiority and hence can gain the reward RD. So to solve the defender's high-level strategic layer problem, we define an extended state that includes the operational state, attacker's belief, a current mode, the remaining switch budget, and the set of already used deception techniques. And the defender's value function compare the expected payoff of staying in the current mode versus switching to an unused deception, which consumes one switching times and changes the game mode. So the value function if staying at the current game mode can be expressed as follows, which is taking expectation over the operational strategy profile and sum up the immediate strategy utility as well as the future expected utility. And the function if switching to other game modes has a similar structure with a max operator in the front, meaning that the defender will choose the best mode from the unused set. And when considering the future expected utility, we need to update the remaining switch times and also the set of used deception technique. Let's proceed to see some simulation insights. So we simulate different attacker lifetime, capital K, and different allow times to switch, such as 0, 1, 2 on the x-axis. And in the case of zero switching budget, shown in the red box, mode 0 represents absence of deception, so that it is easier for the attacker to transit to next step along the attack path, while mode 2 indicates a more sophisticated deception, and it's harder in this case for the attacker to proceed. So we can see that if the defender cannot switch at all, the defender's expected value can be negative when the attacker's lifetime is sufficiently long. For example, in a case when capital K equals to 20, shown in the green color. And in this case, we can say that the defender is likely to lose if there's no budget for switch. However, on the same figure, we can see that just a single well-timing switch can turn a losing game into one with positive expected value, such as right arrow pointed to. And this is a Pareto-like paradox, which states that combining or sequencing losing tactical engagements can produce a winning strategic outcome. And we also simulated attacker cognitive biases. For example, modeling the confirmation bias via parameter lambda that increases stickiness to initial beliefs, or modeling baseline neglect, where attackers overweigh new observations and ignore common prior. And we can see that when attacker um, has such biases, the defender can often achieve even higher total rewards by exploiting those biases. So let's summarize what have been discussed so far. So cognitive arbitrage enables defenders to sustain advantage through deception design that exploits the attacker's trust and belief to waste their time and divert them from some critical assets in a system. And during the simulation part, a parental-like paradox is observed, where strategically coordinating losing tactical or operational engagements can uh, eventually lead to an overall advantage at a strategic level. And this work is one part of my doctoral research on understanding trust issues in CPHS. So if you are interested in other projects that I just briefly mentioned earlier, I'd be happy to discuss them afterwards. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Ya-Ting, for this presentation. And let's open for QA. So, any questions from our online audience? Maybe it takes some time for you to organize your questions, but don't worry. You can always reach out to Ya-Ting offline through emails. And later on, I'm gonna also post these videos on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So you can check when you got time and think deep. And then with that, I would say thank you so much for coming, and let's call it a day. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thanks, John. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Sandeep. Don't worry, no problem.
Happy
Okay,
Thanksgiving.
okay, let me.